Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church, and welcome all of you guys. Happy New Year to all of you. You know, as I was listening to the music, you know what I was doing? I was kind of taking a mental picture of everybody here, because we have not only started a new year, but a new decade, which is a 10-year grouping of years. So it's 20, what year is this now? 2020, and then we got 2021 and 2022 and 2023. So that's a decade all the way through 2029. Hang on a second. Which means the reason I took a picture was that when this decade is over, most of you are going to be in high school, and some of you are going to be out of high school, maybe in college. How quickly 10 years go by. It must seem like an eternity for you. It's just amazing. So I'm just remembering you right now in 2020. As we start the decade. So did you have a good new year? Yeah, go ahead, yeah. You're going to be in third grade soon? Okay, fantastic, yeah. Yes. Yeah, okay. Well, I tell you, 2020, you talk about a faraway future. 2020 used to be a faraway future for me when I was your age. Wow, you know, it was all science fiction, you know. But anyway, let me ask you a question. What do people do when they enter a new year? Well, yeah, go ahead. Okay. Did you make it to 12 o'clock? Okay, good for you. What do people make on a New Year? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, what do you... A New Year resolution. Have any of you made a New Year's resolution? I'd like to hear some of them. We already heard from you. What are some of your New Year's resolutions? Yeah, well, yeah. Let me guess. Stay up to midnight every night. No, okay. Do what, Tim? Salsa. Soccer. Okay. Soccer. Yeah, what's your resolution? Okay. Well, we were talking about resolutions.
Okay. My resolution is watch the alarm clock for 2 hours.
Okay.
Watch the alarm clock till midnight.
What's your resolution?
Eat more food, drink more water, read more books.
Read more books. Great. Great. Yeah. I heard David made a resolution too this new year. He is going to practice the piano more. Oh. Anybody else going to make a resolution to practice the piano? Yeah. What's that? You what? Learn to read. That's fabulous. Yeah. Okay. One more. Okay. Did you check out that resolution with your parents? Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. All right. So listen, again, Happy New Year to you all. Stick to your resolutions, and it's time to light the chalice. I'm going to ask Grace Esko if she'd be so kind to do that for us.
Symbol of light, symbol of knowledge, symbol of warmth, symbol of freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. Let us start our service of the new year by turning our hymn books, please, to number 38. I'm sure that we all have our own way of getting ready for this time of meditation, which you do every Sunday, a chance to just get off the fast track for a moment and just have a chance to pause. And we do probably things in our own ways. It could be taking deep breath or readjusting our seats or whatever. And somehow there's something really inviting about preparing a meditation for a new year. I mean, it's just amazing. You know, all these blank pages on the calendar, all these dates, all this availability, and I think it prompts us to maybe think deeply, more than usual, about the advent of a whole new year. When discussing how he composed his music, Duke Ellington once said that it was good to have limits. He explained that because his trumpet player could reach certain notes beautifully, but not other notes, and the same with his trombonist, he had to write his music within those limits. We live within limits. We compose a life out of finite time. Another year comes our way, and we are grateful for that gift, a gift that comes with limitations. The new year will undoubtedly be a year once again filled with dissonance, but dissonance creates its own meaning. We need to discover what that is in order to help us make sense out of our lives. So as another year comes our way, I realize I feel things more deeply with the passing of years. You know, often the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The habitual becomes sacred. And so much of life is now understood as bittersweet. So let's collect our thoughts and our hopes and our prayers and ponder the poignancy of living in these days. Isn't it amazing that we have entered 2020, a futuristic time when everything was supposed to be push button and gloriously fast and easy, and yet we still ride bicycles and juggle work with family and worry about the state of the world and our children who must forge their lives in a difficult and complex world. Another year has been added to our finite lives. So let us contemplate the poignancy of living in these days. So much turmoil and uncertainty, so much new knowledge and wisdom, so much confidence in technology, yet so much concern about whither we are destined. We are acutely aware of composing our lives within limits, but there is room for improvisation. Harmony can be wrested from dissonance. We move on in a troubled world, but we move on with love and hope and peace in our hearts just as we have always done. May we pray for the strength and courage to continue. Amen. Why, thank you very much. Before we start the reading that's printed in the program, which is really not very long. I want to make note of an article by the book critic Dwight Garner. In reminiscing about books published in 2019, he hit the nail on the head, I believe, when he said, a case could be made that it was a good year to start smoking again. I think we got some ex-smokers here. Yeah, I think that's the best summary of 2019 I think I've heard to date. It's a good year to start smoking again. Garner said there was no escaping the sour and scalded national mood which appeared over and over again, of course, in books. He rightfully claimed that politics pushed to the surface like a fin in this year's fiction. He pointed to a character in a novel by Ali Smith who asked, "How are you doing? Apart from the end of liberal capitalist democracy." We may want to try that if we see a neighbor. "Hey, how are you doing? Apart from the end of liberal capitalist democracy." Yeah, get a response. In a first novel written by Ocean Vuong called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, a young man thought the one good thing about national anthems is that we're already on our feet and therefore ready to run. In an essay written in 2019 by Wendell Berry, he describes a lesson he learned in military school. Quote, "Take a simpleton and give him power and confront him with intelligence, and you have a tyrant." He didn't name names. He just kind of threw that out as a possibility. But perhaps the biggest sign of the times, in book form at least, offers some advice on etiquette written by Lizzie Post, who actually is the great-great-granddaughter of Emily Post. And so she carries on in this tradition of etiquette. Although it's a little bit different, she has a book out called Higher Etiquette, A Guide to the World of Cannabis, From Dispensary to Dinner Parties. Notice it starts off with higher etiquette. Here she's writing about vape pens at weed-centric dinners. She recommends that the vape pens be placed to the right of the setting or across the top of the setting, either between the place card and dessertware or just behind the place card. Although this may lead to a more successful dinner party, I couldn't help but wonder how the times have changed. Of course, those may be the kind of dinner parties we will need in 2020 and beyond. Hey, moving to our scheduled reading. What's happening to us? It's quite a question. It begins with, it's 2020, an election year in the United States. And by the look of the country on TV and in the newspapers, you'd think every day was spent in bitter acrimony over health care and environmental catastrophe and financial inequality, and discussing if we all work for Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. Well, yes. The acrimony was every day. But we still have our hobbies, our jobs, or lack thereof, our love lives, or lack thereof, and our favorite pieces of streaming intellectual property. Even as we grip the big toboggan that is our complicated national conversation, slushing downhill together towards something scary just out of sight, the thing we hear most from people is that they are lonely. MSNBC and Fox News shout down at us. The perpetual red carpet divides the famous from the nobodies. That's us. Instagram influencers create fake dramas, very riveting, while standing on our necks to cut brand deals. Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and Apple and Disney battle for each of our finicky streaming clicks. Our cardboard boxes with rat traps and kitty litter arrive each day from random warehouses in contracted trucks where every driver's forward and reverse is recorded and judged. Our clothing is made by brands that don't exist. In big cities now, our food may be delivered from a restaurant that is just a nameless kitchen with a number of brand logos on delivery websites. The museum has evolved from a place to admire drawings of things from far away to a place to take photographs, of yourself. Frankly, the video games have gotten so good that they threaten not just episodic TV and other pop culture, but also, why even spend time with your family? As a generation of young punks ages into grandparenthood, the younger folks look at the mess we've made with some fair disgust. We built car-dependent communities that ensure we will grow old alone. We powered right through the climate crises, deadline after deadline. We built this isolation for them. But we also left them 97 episodes of news radio, program in the 90s, and the collected works of Janet Jackson. What's happening to us in an America of excess and inequality? What about the quieter pleasures that make up life? We may be nationally obsessed with talking about our internal divisions, but people also really want to hang out, work out, make out, and dance it out. We just don't always know how to get it together.
My snarky companion piece to Tom's readings is not
Don't you love it when musicians are snarky? Yeah. Just a couple of announcements this morning. First of all, a welcome to those who are here for the very first time. I hope that if you made a New Year's resolution to get religion this year, which brings you in through the doors, I hope you keep your resolutions and have a chance to find out more about this congregation at our welcome table, which is right outside that door during our coffee hour. Also, you may have noticed the insert inside your orders of service. It's really an important announcement in terms of the latest offering from our environmental ministry program. They're offering a nonviolence and direct action training program. Take a look at that in a serious way And it will be from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. The announcements, otherwise the written, makes a different time. But it is 10 to 4, so hold on to this. And please, if you can, give the environmental ministry notice or register so they have an idea of how many people they can prepare for. And also, we have, this morning, we have with us a guest from Utahns Against Hunger who really want to take up or are taking up a very serious petition to change the massive tax reform efforts as we closed out 2019. It's a ridiculous new tax structure which has increased taxes on food by 177%. And so we certainly need to make some changes. The caveat is we have to come up with more than 115,000 signatures before January 21st. So how convenient for us that we have Gina at a table right next to the welcoming table to take your signatures, sign the petition, so hopefully we have a chance of restoring some justice in the state. And if you are equally as perplexed by these tax reforms as I am, please add your name to the petition. And I was warned during the first service. I took the liberty of saying, just sign it as many times as you can. But we did have an august emeritus professor from the law school president who reminded me that people can't do that. So just one signature. And it's very important that you are actually a voting member in the state of Utah. Take a look at the rest of your order of service for other announcements. At this time, the offering will gratefully be received, a chance to greet one another and welcome each other with a happy new year. It seems to me that there's a competition among the pundits, both left-leaning and right, a competition of who can create the worst-case scenario for the coming decade. Wow. It was always unpleasant enough when commentators analyzed just the prior year, but now they have a whole decade to unscramble, coming up with mammoth challenges requiring grit and fortitude as we brace for a new year and decade ahead. Predicting, of course, a dystopian chapter in American history just on the horizon, we are more apt to wince than celebrate the dawning of the 2020s. Let me offer some random headlines that point to our descent into hell. There was one, The End of Normal, where lies and conspiracy theories that cycle through Twitter feeds have obliterated facts, thus nothing appears as it is. Normal has been abandoned for whatever it takes to reinforce the ideology of our own bubble. Other headlines include What a Mess We're In, which is sort of self-explanatory. And then there's the decade of disillusionment, which guides us from the Enlightenment ideals expressed during the Obama era to the liberal order just cracking up post the 2016 election to where we currently stand on a very slippery precipice of doom and disaster, and of course we're likely to lose our balance and be swallowed whole. Well, yes, that may happen. It feels like society is anchored by 4 pillars: extremism, racism, nativism, and isolationism. Fear has emerged as the major operative that colors society, leading to a level of distrust never experienced or encountered before. Pundits are quick to tell us that we have completed the hottest decade on record and are about to enter an even hotter one. Climate change has reached the point of no return, where optimists are now defined as the ones who say, well, we still have a few minutes left before reaching that point of no return. Meanwhile, glaciers are melting and California fires have become the expected routine horrors, while Australia is an out-of-control inferno as we speak, and the Amazon rainforest races towards extinction. Although we can practically smell the apocalypse, I'm actually leaning towards hopeful. I am hopeful this first Sunday of a new decade. And I take my cue from the early 20th century Unitarian Associate Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said that what's important in the world is not where we stand, but the direction we are moving. Well, yeah, I think there's currently a new direction that certainly bolsters my hope. It's a movement towards piercing the bleak perception that our polarized society will become even more deeply divided this election year. And the perception that the Republican Party works as a monolithic bloc in support of a right-wing strongman, and that our environment will lose all common sense protections and safeguards. Now, hope, to be honest, remains a tough card to play because you're going to face a lot of accusations of being in denial. I mean, our most recent assassination by drone in the Middle East has caused global jitters, justifiably, and has rendered a hard knock against anyone who even dares to breathe a breath of hope. Hope it's not an easy path to pursue. I believe, however, that hope does get a bit of a reprieve these days as a top panel of government-appointed scientists, most of them hand-selected by the current administration, took aim at the president for abandoning Obama-era policies on curbing global warming. Now, this panel, comprised of what our president believed were Republican scientists, who of course would interpret science in Republican ways, this panel issued a stern rebuke of the president for dismantling so many of the Obama environmental policies and, of course, the regulations on our nation's waterways. So the 41 scientists who were selected to replace the Obama-appointed scientists and whose job description actually includes a responsibility for evaluating scientific integrity. This panel of scientists charged the current administration with being at odds with sound scientific research. The panel charged the president of flying in the face, that's a quote, flying in the face of scientific evidence as he tries to eliminate environmental regulations. And so this new message, I feel a message of hope, this new message to America as we start a new decade is that there's no such thing as Obama scientists and Trump scientists. Science has its own integrity, and water pollution and health regulations and climate warming are not partisan issues, but based on scientific analyses, really unfiltered, untouched, unpolluted by politics. I'm reminded, actually this all reminds me of a quip from Bertrand Russell, who made reference apparently to some foolish conjecture made by Aristotle. I don't know if you've heard this before, it was new to me, but supposedly, according to Aristotle, men had more teeth than women. Okay, so rather rely on foolish speculation, Bertrand Russell suggested a simple device in which Aristotle should have asked Mrs. Aristotle to keep her mouth open while he counted. In other words, access to reasonable data is often within reach unless we deliberately choose otherwise or prefer a different outcome. I have been fed a spoonful of hope by Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts. Although he's not a Unitarian, he's okay, I'll never give him. He still offered firm and pointed remarks that he will preside over the impeachment trial in strictly non-partisan ways. He reminded the president that there's no such thing as Obama judges and Trump judges and Bush judges and Clinton judges. He said, and I quote, "We have dedicated judges doing their level best to do equal right to those appearing before them." And as these are building blocks, I see, as we're tempted to be just horrified by our divisions in this country going deeper and deeper and deeper, but there really seems to be a movement towards the contrary. And of course, there's hope to be savored now that Senator Susan Collins has added her doubts to those expressed by Senator Lisa Murkowski, that the Mitch McConnell plan to fully cooperate with the White House during the trial does not exactly showcase a fair and just system. I mean, what was it the other day that Obama said that women were better leaders than men? Remember that? Well, here's a case in point. And furthermore, the Republican monolith now begins to show some cracks, as one more senator is needed to break rank, and a fair impeachment trial will certainly ensue. So we've got these signs of hope, which are encouraging, but we also need to be quite clear. Hope does not eradicate the dire circumstances we face. A white nationalist president is, in fact, in office and poses grave threats to our democracy while destabilizing world peace. But the funny thing about hope is it keeps jabbing at us, reminding us that, come on now, not all is hopeless. Hope motivates us to move towards change rather than fall prey to cynicism. Now, granted, it's a tricky thing to balance hope over and against these raving predictions and analyses broadcast nonstop by journalists in all media outlets. But hope remains so essential, not only for our own mental well-being, but even more importantly, for the sake of younger generations. And I'm thinking specifically of young families with children and just the children themselves. What do we communicate to them about the future? You know, as teachers, as ministers, as parents, as grandparents, we need to speak truthfully about the precarious future that lies before us. But we also need to provide a framework of hope in order to inspire and motivate new generations to actually participate in bringing about a future for which we all desperately long for. Now, when you think about it, and maybe because it's just kind of an easy thing to do, we don't want to bother getting complicated with, with truths and what the future looks like and the obstacles we face. We just make a lot of promises to children. We do that in this church. From the time we welcome them into our community as babies with the rose ceremony and our pledging these words of support and commitments to make the world better for them, then it kind of goes up, as the kids age, the children in the classrooms, we promise that, if you keep working on your social justice projects, it's going to help make the world better. Yeah, it will, but these are still easy promises that we make. And then, of course, to the young adults themselves and young parents who have already sampled too much of a world with shrinking options for redemption. We make promises to them all of a better world. Well, I don't know. Clearly our young adults wish to belong to a community that balances the harsh realities of environmental degradation, right-wing extremism, but balance this all with a more circumspect view that, there is hope, and there's hope that really penetrates a daunting future. This is part of our church's calling in these difficult times. And we exist as a congregation not to provide escape with manufactured optimism or easy promises, but we exist to provide a powerful response to the injustices we experience. We certainly know that totalitarianism is founded on the violation of truth. And so as the congregation, comprised of all generations, we gather together with a profound thirst to plumb the truths that matter, the truths by which we can live honorably and raise our young families with sound hope. We search for truths that restore integrity and trust to our society. And in fact, we commit ourselves to the life of this congregation because we want to restore confidence in the future. And this church serves as a means to that end. I'll go so far as to say that our church, this congregation, has an obligation, a profound obligation to address the precarious future in both truthful and compassionate ways. In our hearts we want to discuss the world as good and promising and full of potential, but caution here, because we can fall into the trap of pretending the world is other than it is. We certainly got a reminder of this just recently. We got our comeuppance from Greta Thunberg, who just turned 17 the day before yesterday. The boomer generation is indeed guilty of pretending the world is other than it is. And when we look squarely at the truth of the world as we find it now and where it seems to be going, what do? We punt. We punt to the younger generation as a source of hope. It's as though we no longer have a stake in the future anymore. So Greta says, you look to us, you look to the youth for hope? No thanks. You broke it, you fix it. That's right. Youth cannot be expected to bail you out of the mess that you created for us. Thunberg exposed my generation and its failure to preserve a future. We have failed miserably in that, due mostly to our succumbing to the poisons of greed and hatred and delusions about what we conveniently think really matters in this world and our self-importance in it. Greta has my deepest respect, not only because she got under the thin skin of our president, not only because she led a global revolution which started with her, one schoolgirl sitting alone outside her school in protest of a world-denying climate disaster. I respect her also because she made me aware of my easy quest for hope. Yeah, I admit, I placed hope in the rambunctious children of our Sunday school, in their boundless energy and fresh ideas and vigorous determination to conquer everything and everyone. And go, oh, yeah, there's our hope. They sat here in front of us this morning. By trying to locate hope in the next generation, I do the world a great disservice. I do a disservice to the youth. I and so many of my generation seem to just wait idly for someone else, another generation even, to assume responsibility for restoring what we ultimately have destroyed. Hope for facing a new decade lies in the scientists of my generation who speak the truth forcibly. Hope lies in the politicians who have found their voices in acts of great courage. Hope lies in justice being articulated as a human right that must be applied to everyone. And so in our conversations with children, whether they be in Sunday school or even more privately at home around the dinner table, we need to be truthful with them and yet also cognizant that we cannot protect them from the world as it really is. You know, perhaps instead of promising them a perfect world, what on earth does that mean? Instead of promising them a perfect world, we can begin to discuss the need for relating effectively to an imperfect world. That's where we are, an imperfect world. Help them see it. And again, you know, there's much Buddhist insight into our yearning, at least my generation's yearning for more and more accumulation of things, our self-absorption, our greed, our separation from others, as though these traits served as antidotes to our own worries, concerns, and sorrows. You know, I do want to share one story, one quick story, which I think goes right to the heart of our problems, namely our own self-importance. Our own self-importance in a world that unravels mainly due to, this self-absorption, the self-interest that we have. Perhaps young parents can benefit from the story as well, as so many find themselves in this frantic mode as they aspire. They're so worried about their children being successful, making it, that, although well-intentioned, they just really promote their kids, help the kids be, the best in class. And so there are niches now that are created, like helicopter parents, snowplow parents, tiger moms, all bracing for a future, which presidential hopeful Andrew Young portrays an economy of shrinking possibilities, unless you're designing robots or something like that. But here's the lesson we may all want to take to heart, young and old, as we strategize ways of noodling through a precarious world on its way to extinction, and also encountering our own self-absorption. So here's the story. It may take you to tomorrow to really get the story, but that's how Buddhism works. You just sit on it for a little bit. There was a man who sought out a great spiritual teacher in India, a guru, in fact. And years after his beloved teacher died, he went back to India to visit with the guru's most devoted disciple. "I must show you something," said the disciple. "This is what our teacher left for me." Oh, the man was extremely excited, to be sure. Any trace of his teacher was like sweet nectar. And so he watched as the elderly disciple opened the creaking doors of an ancient wooden wardrobe and took something from the back of the bottom shelf. It was wrapped in an old, dirty cloth. "Do you see?" he asked the man. "No. See what?" The disciple unwrapped the object, revealing an old, beat-up aluminum pot. The kind of pot one sees in every kitchen throughout India. Looking deeply in the man's eyes, he told him, "He left this for me when he went away. Do you see? Do you see?" "No," he replied, "I don't see." Well, the disciple looked at him intently with a mad glint in his eyes, and he said, "You don't have to shine." And then he rewrapped the pot and put it back on the bottom shelf of the wardrobe. Well, the man left, beginning to understand this important teaching. There was no need to transform himself into something he imagined he had to be. His ordinary self, wrapped in all its primitive agony, this was precious too. If he could learn to hold himself with the care the disciples showed while clutching the old pot, it would be enough. You don't have to shine. In Buddhist thought, much of our sorrow is caused by feeling insecure in this world. And how do we respond in our insecurity? It's our decisions that we make, the delusions that we hold are actually a defense against what feels like impossible situations. I'm not comfortable in my own skin. We're facing this, and so we go through all sorts of delusions. And as we enter a new decade, starting with 2020, it feels as though we're entering an impossible situation. This is a pivotal year, but they all seem to be pivotal years that test our sanity as well as our faith in humanity. but we have a choice in how we respond. And that's the linchpin of hope. We have a choice. We can actively pursue change and redirect the course of what may seem inevitable. We believe that. We believe we can pursue change. And that's the reason our social justice programs are especially strong in this congregation. It not only means we are prepared to commit ourselves personally and institutionally to creating a just and peaceful world, but it means, when you really kind of look at it objectively, it means we are a people who hope. We would never garner this kind of commitment if hopelessness permeated this community. Every generation is deeply challenged by this new year. And hope is found amidst all of us when we act with great intentionality to transform the world where selfishness, conceit, pride, envy begin to dissipate. As a responsible house of worship, it is crucial that we teach our children about the nature of the world as it is, rather than offer them all these promises we cannot keep. We need to prepare the next generation, we need to prepare ourselves to deal in an imperfect world. So we can certainly tell the story about how, we don't need to shine. We can also follow the very easy yet brilliant insight of a poem by Jill Schultheis, which goes like this. We are fragile, we are not broken. We are imperfect, we are not flawed. We are vulnerable, we are not weak. We are of this earth, and yet the divine lives in us. May we keep hope alive throughout this new year, throughout the new decade, throughout our lives, because we can't make it without it. So be it. Can we conclude our service turning our hymn books, please, to number 350? So as we enter this new year, may we indeed find hope and strength. May we combine intellect and intuition, compassion and action. May we honor the truth of our own lives and grow in the love of life that keeps before us a newness and freshness of the Spirit. Amen. Thanks, David. As we break for coffee and conversation, please remember to sign the petition if you're so inclined to remove the new tax reform plan. It's got to go. Please sign up. Thanks so much.